Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about my favorite books of this year and the worst books that I read this year. To be honest, I find that I am a really forgiving reviewer. If I like something, I like it. But if I don't like something, I really don't like it. And there was only 3 books that I really did not like, to the point where I hate read them. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna alternate one really liked book and then do a book that I did not like as much. And you can see I've pulled a whole bunch of books off of my shelves. So let's get started. Let's start with a book that I really liked. So let's get the most obvious one out of the way. I really enjoyed Fourth Wing. This book took the internet by storm, and I really enjoyed this book, but not in the same way that I enjoyed some other books. Fourth Wing follows Violet Sorrengail, a young woman who is entering Basgiath War College, which is a super deadly college that turns out dragon riders for this world's military complex. I enjoyed this, but this has problems. I will accept criticism of Fourth Wing. It's been kind of divisive. A lot of people love it. It has really high reviews, but a lot of people complain that they don't think that it deserves the reviews that it has. But to be honest, it's just a fun book. Sometimes I read a book and it's just a book for a good time, and that's what this is. There's plot holes. The world building is not great. It's kind of clunky. The dialogue and the writing, not great. I really enjoyed this. I found it to be a lot of fun, and it has been a really great book for bringing in new people into reading. And I think that a lot of people who have heard about this book, who are not part of BookTube or Book Talk, have discovered that, hey, you can read stuff and it can be fun, and you don't necessarily have to read stuffy classics or, things that your high school English teacher forced you to read and made you hate reading. So I really enjoyed Fourth Wing. A book that I read that I did not like. This is gonna hurt some feelings. This book came out shortly after Fourth Wing, and on Book Talk in particular, it was touted as being, hey, read this if you really enjoyed Fourth Wing. I don't have a copy of it, so I'll put it here. It's Divine Rivals. I enjoyed the first part of Divine Rivals, but my problems with it were that the first third of the book felt like a prologue. The middle half of the book was fine, and then the ending really threw me for a loop. And this is something, there is another Rebecca Ross book on my least favorite books of the year list, and it's something that she did in that book as well. I think that part of the problem was that I had just come off of reading Fourth Wing, and I had forgiven a lot of that book's problems, and I was looking for something that was better written, and I got sucked into the hype on TikTok. Everybody was saying that it was wonderful and it was beautiful, and it was this really great enemies to lovers and all of this stuff, and it just wasn't it for me. I did not like it. It wasn't enemies to lovers. The guy was never her enemy. He was always interested in her, and I felt like the fantasy elements really took a back seat to the romance, and I didn't think the romance was that great. And so because of that, for me, Divine Rivals was one of the worst books that I read this year. And initially when I read it, I didn't hate it quite as much, but the longer I've gone on, every time it pops up in my head and I think, oh, Divine Rivals, or I see somebody talking about it, I have a visceral reaction to it. I'm like, oh God, I hated that book. So sorry if it was your favorite, but I didn't like it. Another book that I absolutely loved this year. I read this in the second half of the year, and I got an arc of the second book in this series. I adored Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. This was so good. I would say that this is a cozy fantasy. What I liked about this book is that there are fairies in this, but it's not like ACOTAR fairies where they're hot. It's real mythical creature fairies where they're all different. There's different like different types of fairies, and some of them are kind of like ugly and disturbing and creepy. The other thing that I really liked about this, that one of my favorites from this year did, and I've read 3 books now, 3 books or series that have kind of followed this. It's where fairy stories kind of like have an archetype. Like fairies have a thing that they do, and fairy stories always end up a certain way, and it sort of follows that, or the main character uses that to their advantage to like manipulate the fairies to get what they want. It's kind of hard to describe, and this book sort of does that. The other thing that I absolutely adored about this book was the relationship between the 2 main characters, between Emily and Wendell. I have never loved a male character as much as I love Wendell. Okay, he is hilarious. They are adorable. I ate this up. I ate this up. This was so good. So good, in fact, that I am gifting a friend of mine a UK copy because I love it that much. This was so good, and it was so cute, and so it was like cute, but also like kind of a really good story that's a little less cute. I'm gonna say cozy light. Like, it's not exactly cozy, but yeah, in this, it's Grumpy Sunshine, where the girl is grumpy. Like, the blurb is, a curmudgeonly professor journeys to a small town on the far north to study fairy folk and discovers dark magic, friendship, and love in this heartwarming, enchanting fantasy. And that is the perfect, like, 1-sentence summary blurb of this book. It was so good. Loved this. Just to get the Rebecca Ross slander out of the way, a book that I did not enjoy this year was River Enchanted. I read this at the beginning of the year, and I wanted to enjoy this. And again, same with Divine Rivals, the longer it's gone on since I've read this, the more I dislike it. It has such a cool premise. Like, I like the idea of it, but what I don't like is that it was slow. I enjoyed the romance aspect of this, of old friends becoming lovers, but what I hated, and what I hated the most, and it is my least favorite thing in a book with romance, is a 3rd act miscommunication breakup. Kill me, gag me with a spoon. I cannot stand it. And this had this, and this was the book where I discovered that I do not like that. It was really slow to start. It took me a long time to get into it. And then that ending, I was just like, I can't. And I have tried a couple of times to pick up the sequel because people say it gets better. I have 0 interest in this. So this is going in the donate pile. Okay, if you have watched any of my videos, you know that I am a R.F. Kuang stan. Anything that she writes, I will read it, and chances are I'm really going to enjoy it. And YellowFace was no different. Like, every time I think about this book, it makes me angry. And I know that that's R.F. Kuang's purpose. Not only was the story, I found the story really gripping and compelling, but like, she just pointed out so many things that people do, and it just, I don't even have words to describe the fever dream that was this book. I read it in a day. I cleaned my house for an entire day so that I could continue to read this. This was so, so good. And the ending was absolutely bonkers, and I was not expecting it. I had no idea how it was going to end, because this is a story about a white woman stealing her Asian friend's manuscript and passing it off as her own work after she dies. Like, I mean, it could only end in a bonkers way, and this absolutely did. And R.F. Kuang continues to be the GOAT, and I will continue to be an R.F. Kuang's stan, and I will accept 0 criticism of this book. I'm just kidding. If you want to criticize it, it's fine, but I will question your taste. Another book that I really did not enjoy this year, but that I don't have a copy of. This was a Kindle Unlimited book that I read. And I read it. It was absolutely nuts, but it was terrible. The writing was not good. The plot, I couldn't even tell you what the plot was about. At this point, like I don't even remember. I just remember it being wild. There was Greek gods and witches, and I don't even know. I don't even know. Coven of Ruin. What was this? What is this book? I genuinely, I know I didn't like it, but I can't remember it. And I remember reading it and being like, what in the hell am I reading? But I read the whole thing. So, not the worst book that I read this year, but also definitely not the best. Another book that I absolutely adored this year. I think this might be my favorite Brandon Sanderson, and that is Tress of the Emerald Sea. This is cozy, I think. I would call this cozy. To me, cozy is not like just absolutely nothing happening. There is stuff happening in this book. It is a little bit high stakes, but it's like low stakes cozy. I loved this. This was so cute. It is Princess Bride. It begs the question, what would happen if Buttercup from The Princess Bride actually just went after her man instead of waiting around for him to come find her? There's an obsession with teacups, really cool magic system. Brandon Sanderson knocked it out of the park with this one. This was excellent. If you have not read any Brandon Sanderson and you're wanting to get a taste of what Brandon Sanderson is like, this is a really great entry point. I know a lot of people say that Mistborn is a really great entry point, but to me, this is really great because it's a standalone, it's low commitment, it's only like 400-ish pages, maybe not even quite that much. It's 370-ish pages, okay? So it's pretty low commitment, and it's a like self-contained story, but it's also within the Cosmere. So there are, if you read this one first, there will be little Easter eggs that you'll pick up on after you've read some more Brandon Sanderson. I enjoyed this. This was so cute. It was so sweet. I giggled. I was kicking my feet. I was nervous for them. I was like, how are they going to get out of this? This was an excellent book. Another book that I read this year that I just did not really enjoy, and I also kind of don't remember what happened or what it was about, was Heart of Night and Fire by Nisha Tooley. I have read other Nisha Tooley books and I thoroughly enjoyed those. This one was not for me, and that sucks because this is an Indian-inspired fantasy and it just was not for me. I can't remember what happened. The characters were forgettable. The plot was basic. Yeah, it just wasn't for me. Now, I will say, Trials of the Sun Queen and Rule of the Aurora King, I really enjoyed those. And they are kind of similar where they're not like the world building is not super great or whatever, but I liked the story and I liked the characters in those, and I can't wait until the third one comes out. And those are also free on Kindle Unlimited, but Heart of Night and Fire was not it for me. If you're wanting a really great book that is short, that is written by an Indigenous author, look no further than Green Fuse Burning. This short novella that is just under 100 pages is the most beautiful writing. Some of the most beautiful writing I have read this year. It is a really great story. It is about our main character, Rita, who is really struggling after the death of her father, and her girlfriend Molly gets her a scholarship type thing to go away to a small cabin for the week to paint. And her mental condition just starts to deteriorate while she's there. And it's a really great exploration of grief. And it's also on the website for Stelliform Press. I think they called it ecological horror. And because it has a lot of like nature elements and like kind of like how our world is breaking down due to like global warming and stuff, this was spectacular. This was so good, and it's short. You can order a copy from Stelliform Press. I will try to remember to put it in the description if you want to get a copy. It's only like $20, and you're supporting an indie author and an indie publisher. And mine came with this artwork, and it is beadwork that's also done by a native artist, and it's super cool. This is This was excellent. This was spectacular. Another book that I did not enjoy. This was book 2 in a series. Book 1 was nuts. And I had no idea what I read, but I genuinely like wanted to know what happened. Book 2 is called Of Ashen and Embers by Jenna Wolfhardt. I hated this. I hated it. But I read the whole thing and I got an arc of the 3rd one and I DNF'd the 3rd one. This was trash. It was trash. Like, and I say that in the most loving way that I possibly can. You might genuinely like that book and that's great. And I say that it's terrible, but like I read the whole thing. I don't even know what to say about it. Like it's not the worst book that I've read, but it's definitely not the best. The next book that I truly, truly loved this year, it's a slight cheat. It's an entire series and one of the books in the series I read last year. But that is the Scythe series by Neal Schusterman. This was so good. Oh my God. These were amazing. In these books, it's a utopian dystopia. It's a utopian world where there's no death, there's no disease, there's no poverty, nobody is struggling for food or anything like that. And the entire world is run by an AI called the Thunderhead. There is one problem though, and that is overpopulation. And so the way that they have decided to combat overpopulation is by having something called the Scythedom. And those are people who are essentially above the law who choose to do gleanings, which is where they kill people, to combat overpopulation. And so in the first book, you follow Citra and Rowan as they are chosen to become scythes, and you go through that whole process with them. But the next 2 books, and really even half of the first book, are this absolutely wild ride. And Neal Schusterman does the thing that Brandon Sanderson does that I love so much, where he just throws out like a little tiny detail and it's, you know, it seems insignificant, but then it comes back and you're just like, oh, whoa. I cried at the ending of the series. I am going to get the short story collection. I just haven't done it yet. This was spectacular. And this is technically a YA, but it is very dark and the themes are very dark because we're talking about killing people. I mean, you know, so, but it's a YA because the characters are younger. But anyways, this was amazing. I cannot say enough good things about the Scythe series and about Neal Schusterman. I read Unwind by Neal Schusterman as well, and that one is also incredibly dark, but it was also very, very good. These were so good. I wish that I could read these again for the first time. Second worst book that I read this year. And this is sort of similar to Divine Rivals, where the longer it's been since I've read it and the more that I think about it, the less I like it. And that is Assistant to the Villain. This book was terrible. Like, I even went out and got a first edition copy of this because I like, you know, I was so excited about it. Everybody was like, this book is going to be great. It's going to be so good. It's about a girl who's an assistant to the villain. Like, that sounds so cool in theory, except for that he's like a villain light. He's not really a villain. But then he's like murdering people and she's just like stepping over corpses like it's nothing and talking about how hot he is. And then her dad, spoiler alert, her dad ends up being the big bad guy. But you spend the entire book thinking, oh, her dad is this sweet guy who's just sick. Come on. Come on. This made no sense. This made no sense. And it's a series. Gag me with a spoon. This was terrible. One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns is one of the best books series that I read this year. I initially read One Dark Window last year when it first came out, and I reread it this year, and I liked it more on the reread. And Two Twisted Crowns was a spectacular sequel. I cried at the end. This was so good. It was so dark, and the magic system was so cool, and it was very high stakes, and the hype around this series, this duology, is very real. So good. This was so good. And it's a fantasy romance too, so there is some light romance elements. I loved this. I loved both of these. These were great. This will probably be a surprise to no one. I read this book for one of my very first reading blogs, and I hated it. And the longer time has gone on, I have hated it more. Okay? This is the worst book that I read this year. and that is Starbringer by Tracy Wolff and somebody else, Nina Croft. This book was hot garbage. You mean to tell me that you're a princess and you're on a spaceship and your spaceship has just been blown up? You think that your best friend is dead and you're gonna try to make out with a guy? You have no food or water and you're stuck on a spaceship with a bunch of people you don't know, and you're gonna make out with some guy who was supposed to be a bodyguard but suddenly isn't a bodyguard, isn't who he says he is, and you're gonna make out with him? Get real. That took me out of this book immediately. Not to mention that the plot was terrible. This book was trash. I hated this book, and I purposefully planned to film this video a little bit early. We're only halfway through December. I wanted to film this early so that I could get rid of this. I'm taking a bunch of stuff to McKay's today so that I can get rid of this specific book. This was awful. I hated this. And now, this comes as a surprise to no one, I'm sure. My favorite book of the year is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. I got an arc of this. I was so tickled that I got an arc of Shannon Chakraborty. She's my favorite author. I am a fiend for City of Brass. I will accept zero slander on City of Brass. It's my favorite series of all time, with this potentially being a close second, but there's only one book yet out, so I can't say for sure. But this book follows Amina, retired pirate queen, as she's sucked back into her pirate life by the mother of one of her fallen comrades, and is sent on a quest to find her fallen comrade's daughter, who mysteriously ran away. And the first half of this book is her getting the band back together, and I gotta tell you, I love the band. I want to be friends with the band. I want to be part of the pirate band. I loved this book. And not only that, not only is it like getting the band back together, the characters are all older, okay? The characters are older, and me, being 31, I loved that, because most of the books that I read have some like 19-year-old hot FMC. Not Amina. She's hot, but she's not 19 anymore, okay? She's got a daughter, and she just wants to go home and take care of her family. She doesn't want to be a pirate queen anymore, but she loves the sea, and she loves her boat. And there is a hot himbo demon. I cannot wait for the next book in this series. I cannot wait. I adored this. I have talked about this book to everyone who has given me an opportunity to talk about it. I've convinced my friend to read it. I have bought a copy for another friend, still waiting on her to read it. My husband is in the middle of reading this book. I love this book. This is the best book that I've read this year, bar none. So those were my favorite and my least favorite books of the year. And I would just like to say that if some of my least favorite books of the year were your favorites, I'm so happy for you. I think that's great. And I'm bummed that you liked him and I didn't. And if you haven't read The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, you really need to, because it's like a really great book. It's a pirate fantasy. It was the year of pirates, and that was the best pirate book. I think it was the only pirate book that I read, but it was the best one objectively. So anyways, I will see you all in the next video, and I cannot wait to read more wonderful books with you in 2024. Bye.